And welcome back to the NFLandU podcast. I'm your host, as always, Hayden Vassar. And man, this is it, people. We've made it through 16. I almost wanted to say agonizing weeks of football, and I don't know why. It's been a long stretch, but we finally made it. We're in the final week of the regular season, and we're going to recap all the games that happened through Saturday, Sunday, and Monday night here on today's show. 16 games to get to. We got some really surprising results. A lot of craziness and just absurdity throughout all 3 days of football. We'll talk about who won, who lost, what it means, and, of course, playoffs. Who's in and who's out as of right now. And some surprising results over the weekend led to some surprising moves in the playoff spots. Teams that were in going into Saturday and Sunday are now suddenly out. A lot to get into. And I see no better place to start than, Saturday. Let's be honest about this. This might have been the greatest Saturday slate of NFL football we've ever had. From wire to wire, each game was exciting, exhilarating, and each one offered something different. It was so great from beginning to end. So let's start with the first game on Saturday, the early afternoon one. Houston at Tampa Bay, the greatest game ever. Houston wins this one 20-3. Houston improves to 10-5 on the year, and they mathematically clinch the AFC South. So the final division winner in the AFC has been determined. They improved to 10-5, have won 2 straight. They're feeling great about themselves. And poor Tampa Bay, 7-8, and it snaps a 4-game winning streak. Jameis Winston implodes, and not in a good way, as this Texans team barely scrapes by as they win one of the weirdest games of the year. So, the Jameis Winston Express. It's either going to be really, really good or really, really bad. There is no in between and there is no middleman. And on Saturday in the early afternoon, it was really, really, really bad. Tampa Bay starts out, they get the ball. Their first play, it was a run, so nothing really to worry about. Hey, at least they didn't turn it over on the first play. Second play is scrimmage for Tampa Bay. Jameis drops back to pass, and it gets intercepted, and it gets returned all the way for a touchdown as he throws his 6th pick 6 of the year, which ties him for an NFL record for most in a season. And you're thinking, great, he got it out of the way early. Now he can go out and play just like he did last week against Detroit. He'll be fine and dandy. Then I think it was either the very next drive for Tampa Bay or the one right after that, he threw another interception. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, this kid just cannot stop. And Texans jump out to an early 10-0 lead. And you're thinking, oh God, this is going to be the bad version of Jameis that we've seen a couple of times this year. And you know what? After those early interceptions, he kind of settled down. The keyword is kind of. And he got the Buccaneers back into it. And despite, the early turnovers of the pick 6, the Texans didn't capitalize on these miscues by Tampa Bay. I said they jumped out to that early 10-0 lead, but after that they put up 7 more points, and Tampa Bay was able to rally, scored 17 of their own, and they went into halftime tied. I mean, if I told you that in the first quarter, a quarterback, the opposing quarterback that your team is playing threw 2 interceptions and one of them a pick 6, you would think that, oh my gosh, this is a one-sided first half. But when you're Jameis Winston, nothing is for certain. It was this high-scoring back and forth, turnover-laden on both sides first half, and then in the second half, the scoring slowed by both teams. In fact, 9 total points in the second half by both teams. Houston had the go-ahead score with 7 minutes and 11 seconds left in the fourth quarter after a 37-yard field goal by Kaimi Fairbairn to get up 3 points. Winston got the ball back late, and he had a shot, and you just knew it was coming. He gets intercepted again as he threw his 4th interception of the game, as Tampa Bay had 5 total turnovers in the game. And this is like the second or third time this year that they've had at least 5 turnovers in a game. Most of which came from Jameis. And and it was so bad because The really sad part is, before the game, Ian Rappaport reported that the current plan by Tampa Bay is to franchise tag Jameis Winston in the offseason, which means they're planning to bring him back for at least one more year. That leaks out about an hour before the game. And then the game starts and he throws 4 interceptions. Remember a couple weeks ago when I said never go full Jameis? He went full Jameis. This was the Renaissance painting of Jameis Winston. So many turnovers, shooting his team in the foot, but they were right there till the very end. In fact, here's this crazy stat. They outgained the Houston Texans by over 200 yards. Tampa Bay put up 435 total yards. Houston put up 229. They just couldn't get anything going against this Tampa Bay defense. It made no sense at all whatsoever. This was the ultimate Jameis Winston game, where he threw multiple turnovers, gave his team every reason to doubt he should be the quarterback, and then he is the sole reason that they're still in it with like 2 minutes left in the game. That he brought them all the way back. This only happens to Jameis Winston, I swear on my life. It is so odd. It is beautiful. It was a flaming dumpster fire. It was a train wreck of monumental proportions, but I couldn't look away. It was so beautiful to watch. It was good bad football, or bad good football, whatever you want to call it. It was Jameis football. Jameis Winston finished 25 of 48, 335 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions, 3 sacks. We questioned who he was going to throw to. Brashad Perryman had another nice day, 7 catches, 102 yards. And if Tampa Bay could put up points, I mean, they were there till the very end, so at least they can move the ball well no matter who they have running routes for them. Speaking to Deshaun Watson real quick, 19 of 32, 184 yards, 1 interception, 5 sacks. The Texans offense did not play well. They couldn't run the ball well. They couldn't do anything well. But they gutted out a big win on the road and are now AFC South Division champions because of it. And now you got to wonder, what are the Texans going to do next week? Because as of right now, the Texans are the 4th seed in the playoffs, and at best, they could move up to the 3rd seed, which really isn't much of a difference. It just means maybe you get a different opponent in the first round. So, take your fancy. Would you rather play Buffalo, Tennessee, Pittsburgh? Who would you rather play right now for Houston? Either that, or you could just, pack up shop and give your starters an off week. So, what's Houston going to do next week? For Tampa Bay, they face a different problem. Because once again, Jameis Winston is your quarterback. In all seriousness, if they're truly deciding on bringing Jameis Winston back, they have to really think about it. Not just because of this bad game, but because of this entire season. He has proven that he cannot stop the turnovers. There is no part of Jameis Winston that thinks when he's throwing the football, this could end up intercepted. He just grips it and rips it, man. That's why he's beautiful. But Jameis Winston, by the end of the season, could very well be a charter member of the 30 and 30 club. That means where he throws 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in a single season. And if you don't know, that is very not good. Very, very not good. He's got one more game and he needs 3 or 4 interceptions to reach it. And there is not a doubt in my mind that he'll get there. And maybe win the game and throw 5 touchdowns. Who knows? Once again, Houston wins 23-20 in a very odd turnover-laden game. It was 7 combined turnovers by both teams. It was nonsense. It made no sense, and it was beautiful. Moving on to the second game on Saturday, Buffalo at New England. A good game, but of a different variety. New England wins a heart-stopping thriller at the goal line, 24-17. New England improves to 12-3 on the year. Clinches the AFC West as a result, and has a 2-game winning streak going. And Buffalo, they fought their heart out, and they fall to 10-5 though. So the New England offense comes alive in a big time game, just enough. They came alive just enough to outlast a very game Buffalo Bills team. So with 5 minutes and 6 seconds left in the fourth quarter, Rex Burkhead punches in a 1-yard touchdown to give the Pats a go-ahead score. And then Brady hits Julian Edelman on a 2-point conversion. and now all of a sudden they're up 7 points late in the fourth quarter, and now you got to ask a Buffalo Bills team to drive the length of the field against this good Patriots defense to basically tie the game. Buffalo gets the ball back, and for the vast majority of the game, Josh Allen and the rest of that Bills offense have been really anemic and not really doing a whole lot. They had that nice touchdown drive right before halftime where they had an offensive lineman score the touchdown, and then there was that great deep pass to John Brown where he burnt Stephon Gilmore, of all people. I mean, my God. Burnt him like toast. But for the vast majority of the game, the Bills hadn't done anything on offense for most of it. So they get the ball back with, a little over 5 minutes left, and they embark on a 14-play, 60-yard drive. They get right to the New England 8-yard line, but they just can't punch it in. And they turn the ball over on fourth down, and that allows the Pats to, run out what was little left of the clock and clinch their division in a defensive-heavy showdown. For the most part, it was a sloppy, low-scoring game, especially from the Bills, like I mentioned, who turned in a not-so-great performance from their offense. But that's kind of their MO, isn't it? That they're going to live and die by the fact that they're not some great scoring offense that, in a game where the final score is going to be something like this, 24-17, they're very much in belief that they can win that game, and they're going to be the team that scores 24. The Patriots in terms of total yardage, they outgained the Bills 414 to 268. That's really not good. Time of possession: Patriots 38 minutes 52 seconds, Bills 21 minutes 8 seconds. That's really not good. And in the fourth quarter of a game where the Patriots were trailing, the Patriots did what they've done for the better part of almost 20 years with Brady and Belichick. They showed up in the fourth quarter. They outscored the Buffalo Bills 11-0 in the fourth quarter. That's how you finish, man. That's what the Patriots have been doing for 20 years. They just show up in a fourth quarter, and Tom Brady was big time. And Tom Brady had a really nice game. I mean, the numbers aren't eye-popping, and you're not going to look at the stat line that I'm about to read to you and go, wow, what a great game from Brady. He went 26 of 33 for 271 yards, 1 touchdown. That's the entire stat line. But if you sat there and watched that game, that was probably the best Brady performance we've seen all season. He looked great, he looked poised, and you know what? His wide receivers were making some plays. That much maligned wide receiver group that everybody's ragged on this year, they stepped up and made some big plays in this one, and it gave you some hope for the Patriots offense that, maybe they can put something together. It's not going to be big, it's not going to be fancy, and it's not really going to be great. But maybe, just maybe, they can put something together. But finally we saw some life from the Patriots offense, especially their pass offense, which should be very, very encouraging to people. Because that's what's been the part of their offense that has just really been horrific and ugly to watch. Maybe this performance can make the Patriots, watchable on offense. Because this wasn't just, some nobody defense they did this against. They did it to the Bills. The Bills are a good defense. I think we can all recognize that, correct? At least I can. So it was very encouraging to see the Patriots finally flip the switch and look like the team we've expected them to look like for weeks now. It was very, very encouraging. Now, speaking of the Bills, Josh Allen finished the game 13 of 26, so completed half of his passes for 208 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 sacks. Cole Beasley, 7 catches, 108 yards. The Bills' offense had its chances in this game. They just couldn't finish. But that's been their kind of MO all season long. That if this game really comes down to the Bills' offense, you're not going to have a good day. But they really gave the Patriots fits and troubles. I'm not going to harp on the Bills for losing this game. It's always tough to go to New England and win. But it just highlights the concern about the Bills that if they have to put up like 27 points in a game or even 24, there's serious doubts about if they can do that. Once again, New England wins a tough defensive fight, 24-17, and New England is your AFC East champions for what feels like the 80th year in a row. Moving on to the late game on Saturday, and oh wow, this game was crazy too. The Rams at San Francisco. San Francisco wins 34-31 at the buzzer off of Robbie Gould 33-yard field goal as time expires. San Francisco improves to 12-3. Nice bounce back after that loss last week. And the Rams fall to 7-8, and they are now officially eliminated from postseason competition, and they have lost 2 straight. It was a wild game. Oh my gosh, it was wild. It was absurd. It was stupid, and I loved every second of it. So at the start of this game, it was entirely in favor of the Rams. They jumped out to an early 21-10 lead as the 49ers struggled to get anything going on offense. They just couldn't get a single thing going. Jimmy wasn't looking good. The running game wasn't doing much. And Jared Goff, in all honesty, was dealing. Jared Goff had a really good game. 27-46 for 323 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Remember that, because that's about to be important here in about 30 seconds. It was just complete domination by the Rams, and it's getting late into the second quarter, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, the Rams are about to go into halftime up double digits on this 49ers team. Then in the last 2.5 minutes of the first half, the wheels completely fell off the bus for the Rams. It went to hell in a handbasket in a heartbeat for the Rams. They allowed the 49ers to score on a long touchdown drive, capped off by a Raheem Mostert touchdown run that was about 16 yards, if I remember correctly. Then, Rams get the ball back. Jared Goff then throws a pick 6 that's returned 46 yards. And now suddenly, that double-digit lead the Rams had is now gone. And they are now trailing going into halftime down 24-21. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, Rams, what are you doing? And the scoring slowed a bit in the second half, as you could tell by the final score. Rams only scored 10, and so did the 49ers. Both teams only scored 10 points in the second half. So it came down to tied at 31 with little time left. Jimmy Garoppolo, who did not play that well in all honesty, if you'd watched the game or you're just reading the stat line, put on a clinical clutch drive to help them get in field goal range. He hit a beautiful, and my God, I mean beautiful, deep pass to a wide open Deebo Samuel. And how in God's good name Deebo Samuel got that wide open on a play. And if you look on the play and you look who's covering him, it's the guy the Rams traded their first round pick for, Jalen Ramsey, who thought Taylor Rapp, the safety, was going to be covering him, and he wasn't. So now Deebo Samuel is running down the middle of the field wide open with nobody around him. Falls down when he catches it, and it sets up the 49ers in field goal range, and Robbie Gould makes the kick, and all of a sudden the 49ers are back in the first seed in the NFC playoffs. And the Rams are going home heartbroken after a defensive miscue on a game where, the Rams have played pretty well. Jimmy Garoppolo's stat line, like I said, I don't think he played well from watching it. 16 of 27, 248 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 6 sacks. Like I said, I didn't think he played all that well. But on that late field goal drive, I should say, on that late field goal drive, he looked great. He looked poised. He looked phenomenal. And I have confidence gaining every single week that this young man, if it came down to him having to make a clutch touchdown drive in the playoffs in the fourth quarter to win the game, even if it's on the road, that he could do it. He is gaining confidence every single week, even when he doesn't play that well like he did in this one. Speaking of the Rams real quick, like I said, I thought Goff played really well. I already read you his stat line. Robert Woods had a nice game, 8 catches, 117 yards. Tyler Higbee, 9 catches, 104 yards. Just in literally the last 2 minutes of both halves, the Rams just completely fell apart. They allowed, the 2 touchdowns in the first half in the last 2 minutes, and then the last 2 minutes in this one, they just didn't cover Deebo Samuel. And those 2-minute periods in both halves have basically ended the Rams season and sends them into an off season of uncertainty where they're going to have a lot of questions. They have no first round draft pick because that got traded for Jalen Ramsey. There's talk they could fire their defensive coordinator, Wade Phillips. If you are following Mike Silver on Twitter. He wrote a column after the Saturday night game that insinuated that the Rams could be in store for a lot of changes this offseason, so who knows what's going to happen for them. But at least they got that fancy new stadium they're going to move into next year, right? So at least there's that, huh? You got something nice to look forward to, huh? For the 49ers, this was a massive win. They gutted out a tough win against a very game Rams team, and are now back at the number 1 seed. Especially after what happened with Seattle, which we'll get to here in a minute. The 49ers have to be feeling really good about their chances to win next week, get that number 1 overall seed, win their division, and then have the playoffs run through Santa Clara for the rest of the season. Once again, San Francisco wins a shootout 34-31 late Saturday night. And we're moving on to the first of our Sunday games. And I hate to disappoint you, but this one was slightly less competitive than the 3 we just talked about. Carolina at Indianapolis. Indianapolis wins 38-6. Oh no. Indy improves to 7-8 on the season, snaps a 4-game losing streak. Good for them. Carolina falls to 5-10 and have lost 7 straight. And Carolina had something extra going on in this game, and we'll talk about that here in a second. The Indianapolis defense swarmed all over Will Grier, the rookie quarterback, had his debut, and it did not go well. Grier threw 3 interceptions, and the rest of the offense put up 286 total yards and only 6 points, as the Indianapolis defense pitched a pretty good game and effort on their part. But it wasn't just the defense that played really well for Indianapolis. I cannot talk today. Indianapolis special teams also had a really, really great day, as they returned 2 different punts for touchdowns in this one. One in the first half and one in the second half, to really help put things over the top on this Carolina team. And they weren't even short punts. They were very long, like 60-plus yard punt returns that they ran back on Carolina. So the defense played well, the special teams played great, and the offense had a really nice game too, as the Colts ran up and down the field on the Panthers as they racked up 218 combined rushing yards from Marlon Mack, Jacoby Brissett, who ran for a touchdown, Jordan Wilkins, all chipped in a fabulous effort and a fabulous run game to help the Colts move the ball offensively, especially when there wasn't much help from the passing game, if you catch my drift. Jacoby finished 14-27, 119 yards, and 3 sacks. That was their entire passing game. So it wasn't good for the Colts' passing game. But their run game was very effective. It was good, and it took advantage of a very downtrodden Panthers team. Will Grier finished the game 27-44, 224 yards, 3 interceptions, 5 sacks. Like I mentioned before, the Colts defense was swarming on that poor young man. Christian McCaffrey finished the game 13 rushes, 54 yards, 15 receptions, 119 yards. So, like 170-something scrimmage yards. Math off the top of my head. It was a blowout from the very beginning. It was one-sided. And other than, the Colts' domination and Will Grier's very bad debut, there really wasn't much to talk about. The win had to feel nice for the Colts, though, because they've been getting bullied the last couple weeks. The defense have been giving up a lot of points and a lot of yards. So to come home and have a really nice game from their defense and special teams, it was a total team effort win. Had to feel really great for the Colts. And that's about it. And that's what I wrote in my notes earlier today. Until that it was breaking news kind of, but it wasn't a big deal. As ESPN's Adam Schefter reported that the Panthers had met with former Green Bay Packers head coach Mike McCarthy after the game about possibly becoming the new head coach in Carolina. Which is very interesting. I think Mike McCarthy is a good head coach, and I think he's really going to get a job this offseason after, spending a year off to really spend some time with his family and grow as a coach and learn some new techniques. The man made a concerted effort to better himself as a coach and learn new tricks so that he doesn't just get, left behind. And, there are very few coaches on the market who can say that they won a Super Bowl. And Mike McCarthy is literally the only one on the market when you really think about it. I know Ron Rivera is going to be out there, and he went to a Super Bowl, but he didn't win it. That's what Mike McCarthy's going to say. I won a Super Bowl. So give me the job. He's going to get one. It could be interesting if he gets Carolina head coaching job. That'll be interesting to see. But once again, Indianapolis wins a blowout, 38-6, and we're moving on to another less competitive game, but a stunning result nonetheless. Arizona at Seattle. Arizona wins this one 27-13. Arizona improves to 5-9-1 on the season, have won 2 straight, and Seattle falls to 11-4 in a stunning defeat in Seattle. Kenyon Drake has another monster game as he ran up and down on Seattle's defenses, and Chandler Jones, the Cardinals' defensive player, inches closer to history as the Seahawks fell for the trap. We talked about it on Friday's show, that this was about as close to a trap game as you can possibly get, and the Seahawks fell for it. They fell for it hook, line, and sinker. The Cardinals got after Seattle early and often in this game. They put up 412 total yards of offense as Kenyon Drake just ran up and down the field on him. I think like an 80-yard touchdown run earlier in the game. Kenyon Drake finished the game 24 rushes, 166 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Oh, that's great. That's great, man. That young man is balling out. Good for him. And this much maligned Cardinals defense actually had a really great game. They took advantage of an injury-ravaged Seahawks offense. They held them to 224 total yards, held them to 1 and 13 combined on 3rd and 4th downs. That's really not good. 5 sacks, got 1 turnover, allowed only 13 points. This Cardinals defense absolutely showed up, and Chandler Jones was living in the backfield of this game. And because of his efforts in this game, Chandler Jones is now in spitting distance of Michael Strahan's all-time sack record for a season at 22.5. If I remember correctly, Chandler Jones has 19 on the year. So he literally just needs 4 sacks in his next game to break Michael Strahan's single-season sack record, which would be great for Chandler Jones on a season where we've always talked about how the Cardinals' defense is so bad. If Chandler Jones could break the all-time sack record, that would really be something. So, I just mentioned that the Seahawks offense was injury-ravaged. Oh, man, this was not a good game for the Seahawks. And I'm not talking about just because they lost. Seahawks were losing guys left and right in this game. You had Chris Carson leave the game with a hip injury. Fractured his freaking hip in this game. Sounds like he's done for the entire season. CJ Prosise, their other running back, broke one of his arms. He's done for the year. And left tackle Dwayne Brown left this game with a leg injury. And he's going to require surgery to have it fixed. And he's going to be gone for a couple weeks. That's 3 members of their offense now suddenly leaving the game halfway through and out for weeks. No wonder they couldn't move the football at all. Because half their team was freaking injured. But then again, the Cardinals kind of had the same problem, as Kyler Murray, their starting quarterback, left the game in the 3rd quarter because of a hamstring injury. But, even when they had Brett Hundley, the former UCLA quarterback, in there, they were able to gut out a win and hang on to win the game. The Cardinals still hung on despite the injuries. Kyler Murray finished his day 11 of 18, 118 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 sack. Before he had to leave with a hamstring injury. Russell Wilson, the Seahawks quarterback, 16 of 31, 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 5 sacks. Very not good day for the Seahawks offense. Very, very not good. Like I've been saying for like 2 weeks now, the Cardinals have good building blocks to be something interesting in a year or two. Kyler Murray's good. Kenyon Drake is really proven to be something awesome. And Chandler Jones is something special on defense. I'm telling you, he's always put up good numbers, and I've always found it curious as why he seems to keep bouncing around teams. And he's having another great year in Arizona. So I really don't know what to make of it. They have good building blocks, and they're going to be something special in a year or two. I really, really think that about the Cardinals. But speaking to Seattle, this game was very costly, like I just mentioned. They're starting running back now, potentially out for the rest of the year, including the playoffs. CJ Prosise now potentially out for the rest of the year. They're saying Dwayne Brown could miss about 2 to 3 to maybe even 4 weeks. So if Seattle continues to advance in the playoffs, he could miss most of the playoffs. If I'm doing my math right, he would be available maybe Super Bowl weekend if they make it that far. So it was very costly for Seattle, not because they lost the game, but because of who they lost. But there could be good news for Seattle on the horizon. I think it was Ian Rappaport who reported this morning that Beast Mode Marshawn Lynch is apparently meeting with the Seattle Seahawks about a potential return to come play running back again. Oh my gosh, that is just what the NFL needs right now. Give me more Marshawn. Oh, I love Marshawn. He is such a great person. I love him so much. The initial report stated that Marshawn is very open and receptive to a return to the Seahawks, and the Seahawks are very open and receptive right now to having him back because they have no running backs. The last time we saw Lynch was well over a year ago when he was playing running back for the Raiders. And so who knows what's going to happen with Seattle? They kind of have no running backs right now, so they need something. But like I mentioned a minute ago, how San Francisco has to like their chances right now. This is why, because Seattle's so banged up right now. And it sets up a winner-take-all matchup next week on Sunday Night Football. San Francisco at Seattle. Winner takes the NFC West. And if San Francisco wins, they are the number 1 seed. If Seattle wins, it depends on what happens in the rest of the NFC. Will determine what Seattle gets. They could go anywhere from 1 to 2 to maybe even 3. But if they lose, they're getting the wild card. So for Seattle, just focus on winning, not what everybody else is doing. Once again, Arizona wins a stunner 27-13. And we're moving on to a very, very not competitive game. Baltimore at Cleveland. Baltimore wins this one 31-15. Baltimore improves to 13-2 on the year, have won 11 straight, and Baltimore now clinches the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs, so I have to feel great for them. Cleveland falls to 6-9, have lost 2 straight, and just keeps finding new ways to make drama. The bad Browns are just getting uglier and uglier to watch every week as the Ravens skate on by with a nice win. So in the first half, if you were watching this game, you would have noticed the Browns actually had the Ravens in the first half. They had them in a tight, close one. With 2 minutes left in the first half, the Browns had a 6-0 lead on the Ravens with 2 minutes left in the first half. They had capitalized on some Ravens mistakes. There was a Mark Ingram fumble on the Ravens' first drive. They went for on 4th down and didn't get it. And then they were forcing punts left and right. They were just... The Cleveland defense was making some plays and holding Lamar in check, not letting any big plays get by him. And Cleveland was turning in a good defensive effort. They just weren't capitalizing on offense. And, 2 minutes left and you're up 6-0. You think, okay, we're going to go into halftime with the lead. Everything will be fine. And I kid you not, they took their foot off the gas and Lamar made them pay. With less than 2 minutes in the first half, the Ravens quickly scored 2 touchdowns. About as quick as a hiccup. And they made it look effortless. So that 6-0 lead that the Browns were really proud of, that they thought, hey, we kind of got them here on the road, all of a sudden evaporates, and now all of a sudden they're down 14-6 going into halftime. And you're thinking, oh God, this Browns team just cannot get out of their own freaking way. And then in the second half, it was more of the same for the Ravens as they picked up right where they left off. The Ravens had the ball 4 times, so they had 4 drives in the second half. Here's what the end of those drives, here's the end result of those drives. You ready? Touchdown, field goal, touchdown, end of game. Those were the Ravens' 4 drives. So 17 points and then a kneel down at the end of the game. It was a slaughter, and the Browns weren't ready for it. The Ravens showed that they aren't immortal in that first half, that, maybe they could be caught slipping a bit. but they eventually caught fire. And that's the point I want to make about this Ravens team, is that you can't stop them. If you're planning on coming out and pitching a foolproof plan to slow down Lamar Jackson and have that Ravens offense do nothing, you're not going to get it done. I can just tell you now, you're not going to get it done. You can't stop this team. Your only hope is to slow them down. And the Browns did slow them down in the first half. And then the bad Browns showed up and then screwed everything up. They can't be stopped. They can only be hoped to slow down. That Ravens prolific rush attack racked up over 200 rush yards in this one. It was just insane. Lamar Jackson went 20 of 31 for 238 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Then he rushed 17 times for 103 rushing yards. It was insane. Baker Mayfield, on the other hand, didn't have that good of a day. 20 of 33 for 192 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Not that good of a day for the Browns offense. And it became worse because of sideline antics. You had Odell Beckham Jr. getting into it in a very heated confrontation with head coach Freddie Kitchens. And then there was that instance where the Browns offense was coming off the field and the fans are booing the offense and Baker Mayfield. And he waves them off like, oh, forget y'all kind of offense. And then the CBS cameras catches fans flipping off Baker Mayfield. Things are not going good in Cleveland. Things are going very, very bad in Cleveland. And it just feels like a lot of the people on this team right now are probably not going to be there next year. I don't know how they could be. It was a bad game. It was a blowout for the Ravens. It was a bad game for the Browns. But the Ravens got really lucky. You know, Mark Ingram had a scary-looking injury late in this one. He had initially told teammates that he thought he had tore his Achilles. It turns out it's just like a calf strain, so he can take a couple weeks off and be good. And the Ravens now get to kick back and relax and enjoy their spoils that they have earned this season because they've clinched the number 1 overall seed. They literally have nothing to play for now. They've locked up everything. They've locked up home field advantage, playoff spots, all that. They've already announced that they're not going to play their starters next week against Pittsburgh. So they said Lamar, Michael Thomas, Mark Ingram, guys like that will not be playing next week, which is great news for Pittsburgh. Get to rest and relax for 2 weeks. They get next week off, the end of the regular season, and that first round bye that we mentioned. So good for Baltimore. They've earned it. Best team in the NFL right now. Once again, Baltimore wins a blowout 31-15 over a very bad Browns team, and we're moving on to. Okay, I know not everybody's going to be interested in this game, but we're doing every game, so we got to talk about it. Detroit at Denver. I wanted to think of a fun way to intro this game, and I got none. I know nobody cares, but we got to talk about it. Detroit at Denver. Denver wins 27-17. Denver improves to 6-9, get a nice bounce back win. Detroit falls to 3-11-1, have lost 8 straight, and they're just looking at the draft at this point. Drew Lock, the Broncos quarterback, completes the comeback for the Broncos offense in a very kind of weird one. It was very warm in Denver, surprisingly, in December. It was like 64 degrees at kickoff, believe it or not, which makes no freaking sense. It was definitely anything but pretty in this game as the Lions jumped out to an early 10-0 lead after Jamal Agnew 64-yard punt return for a touchdown. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, are the Broncos really going to lose a game to this Lions team? Locke then scored 10 unanswered points in the final 10 minutes. Final 6 minutes. I really am having an off game. 10 unanswered points in the final 6 minutes of the first half to go into the locker room tied at 10 points for each team. And then in the second half, the Broncos picked up right where they left off in the first. They outscored the Lions 17-7 as the Lions offense just looked all kinds of pitiful. Lions put up 191 total yards of offense in this game. 191. 96 of that was rushing. The other 95, in case you can't do math, was passing. They had more rush yards than pass yards. That's sad. That is very sad. David Blau, the Lions quarterback, 12 of 24, 117 yards. That was before the sack, so, equals out to 95. 1 touchdown, 4 sacks, like I just mentioned. Drew Lock, he didn't have a great game. His numbers aren't going to be eye-popping, but it was efficient. 25 of 33, 192 yards, 1 touchdown. Like I said, not eye-popping, but he was efficient. It was a good bounce back from that tough loss last week to Kansas City. The offense really flowed through Phillip Lindsay, 19 rushes, 109 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. So, Broncos complete the second half comeback, and they're really liking their young quarterback. As am I. I'm really starting to like this Drew Lock kid. As for the Lions, the loss, but it was also a win at the same time, oddly enough, as they continue to watch the draft board. I think it sets them up for the 3rd overall pick, if I'm doing my math right, which they're basically going to get almost a pick of the litter for defensive guy, which is what I'm assuming they're going to go with at this point. So the Lions are going to have a great draft pick next year in the draft, so good for them. But for the Broncos, I think they've really found something at quarterback. I know it's the end of the season and guys aren't trying as hard, but Drew Lock is 3-1 as a starter, and he's played arguably some of the best quarterbacking we've seen from a Broncos quarterback this entire season, and probably in a couple years. It's been that bad in Denver. I'm really liking this Drew Lock kid. He's playing some good ball, so it'll be very interesting to see what he can do next year with, an offense that's really tailored to him and all this and that. It'll be very interesting to watch. Once again, Denver completes the comeback, wins 27-17. I had scrolled past it in my notes. And we're moving on to a bit of a bigger game, way more competitive, definitely. New Orleans at Tennessee. New Orleans wins a wild one, 38-28. New Orleans improves to 12-3 have won 2 straight. And Tennessee falls to 8-7 and have lost 2 straight, but are actually big winners. And we're going to tell you why. So, Tennessee jumped out to an early 14-0 lead in the first quarter. Looked nothing like the team that showed up in the first half last week. And they were doing it without Derrick Henry, who didn't play in this game because, remember, the Texans clinched the division the day before, so Houston really didn't want to risk Derrick Henry because they knew no matter what happened in this game, it would not affect their playoff standings. So, they jump out to an early 14-0 lead. Everything's looking great for Tennessee. Then the New Orleans offense finally wakes up in the second quarter. And they scored 10 unanswered points to go into halftime, down 14-10. And you're thinking, all right, here we go. We're going to get some offensive fireworks from both teams in the second half. Well, you got offensive fireworks from New Orleans in the second half. Not so much Tennessee. New Orleans went off in the third quarter. They just went off. They outscored the Titans 21-7 in the third quarter. 21-7. And that helped finish them on a 28-14 run for the rest of the game to help crunch out a big road win. The New Orleans offense looked great. They were throwing it everywhere. Kamara looked like his old self. He had a big touchdown run. It was like 40-something yards in this one. New Orleans offense looked great. I really want to praise the Titans offense real quick, though, because even without Derrick Henry, and he's the focal point of their offense, they really looked great without him. They racked up 149 rushing yards. It just shows that they don't necessarily need Henry to, move the ball. Tannehill had a solid game, 17-27, 272 yards, 3 touchdowns, 5 sacks. Very nice game. But that Saints offense was something else. Drew Brees went 27-38, 279 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 sacks. He just continues to just light everything he touches on fire right now. Oh yeah, and Michael Thomas made history in this game. Broke Marvin Harrison's single-season receptions record in this one. After a 12-catch game where he caught 12 catches, like I just said, 136 yards, 1 touchdown. Michael Thomas is a freaking beast, man. Oh, it's just not fair. Saints are really rounding into shape, and this big-time win on the road after being down double digits in the first half against a very good Titans team is proof of that. It's proof that they're rounding into shape, that they're a serious contender in the NFC. Still very much in the mix for a top seed in the playoffs after this very back and forth effort, Even though they were outscored 28-14 in the second half, Tennessee was still there in almost every single second of that second half. It just felt like, when New Orleans would score, then Tennessee would still be right there. They just refused to go away, which was a very good sign. But like I mentioned, because of the result of the Houston game the day before, no matter what happened in this game, whether Tennessee won or lost, it would not affect their playoff standings. So they lose here, and they've now lost 2 straight, but Tennessee's perfect right now, believe it or not. Everything is set up beautifully for Tennessee, but it's not because of the result of this game. It's because of the result of this next game we're talking about right now. Once again, New Orleans wins 38-28. I know we went through that one kind of quick, but it's important for the narrative that we talk about this next one just as much as we talk about this past one. And that's Pittsburgh at the Jets. The Jets pull the upset, win 16-10. The Jets improved to 6-9 on the year, and Pittsburgh falls to 8-7. They've lost 2 straight. And this is the reason why the fate of Tennessee has now changed, because the Steelers lost. The Jets defense swarmed all over the Steelers as their offense continues to shoot them in the foot in this one just one more time, and it is now officially worst case scenario time for the Pittsburgh Steelers as the Mike Tomlin Steelers once again drop the ball at the worst possible moment. Now, I love Mike Tomlin as a head coach. I think he's a very good head coach, and he deserves a lot of credit. But they have had a stigma and a history that at least once a year they will go on the road and lose a game to a team they shouldn't lose to in disastrous fashion. And I thought that they were kind of immune to that this year, that it wasn't going to happen. And then it reared its head at the worst possible time. The Jets defense gave up 260 total yards and 10 total points, got 2 turnovers, and sacked the Steelers quarterbacks 4 times in this one. So, Devlin Duck Hodges had that terrible game last week where he turned the ball over 5 times. You're thinking, he's probably going to be on a short leash this week. And he was. Started the game out in very rough shape, threw 2 interceptions. Offense wasn't doing anything. So, Tomlin decided, I've seen enough. He decides to bench Devlin Duck Hodges and puts it back in Mason Rudolph to try and provide a spark for the offense. Only one problem. Mason Rudolph didn't last very long because he suffered a severe shoulder injury and had to go back to the bench because he couldn't play anymore. So Duck has to come back in to finish the game, which is probably great for the young man's confidence. Duck gets back in the game. Offense still can't do anything. The Jets outscore the Steelers 6-0 in the second half and to win the game. And it deals an absolutely massive blow to the Steelers' playoff hopes. It was a very defensive-heavy game, but as much as hate as the Steelers' offense has gotten in the media since the game ended, they outgained the Jets in total yardage, albeit by 1 yard, but they still outgained them. So it was all about that defense. The Steelers lost, Mason Rudolph in this game. They lost James Conner, their running back, and Marquise Pouncey, their center. No wonder they struggled to move the ball on offense, but it sounds like all those guys are going to be out for a while, which is even worse. It's already been announced Mason Rudolph is going to be out for a couple of weeks, so he won't be there next week when they need him the most, and even if they make the playoffs, he still won't be there. This win had to feel really good for the Jets because, Le'Veon Bell, who didn't have the greatest game in the world, had a big third down rush that helped set up that last field goal in the fourth quarter that really put the game on ice. But, there isn't a whole lot to talk about in terms of what happened in the game. It was very ugly, defensive heavy. The main storyline from this game is the playoffs, because the Steelers went into this game as the 6th seed in the playoffs, so the very last wild card spot. But because they lost, the Steelers are now on the outside looking in. And you know who's in that current wild card spot? It's the Titans. If the season ended right now, the Tennessee Titans are in the playoffs despite a 2-game losing streak. So, it is simple. If the Titans win this coming weekend, a win at Houston, the Tennessee Titans are in the playoffs. The Steelers now need some help. The Steelers have to win their game next week against Baltimore, who is playing their backup, so it's a bit easier. Steelers have to win that game, and Tennessee has to lose to Houston. And like we said before, we don't know what Houston's going to be doing, if they're going to be resting their starters or not. We don't know. So a lot is riding on this game, that game next week. And by the way, once again, the Steelers are probably going to be without Marquise Pouncey, James Conner, and Mason Rudolph. Because when you're going uphill, why not make things more difficult, am I right? So like I said, the Titans are sitting really pretty, am I right? They just have to win their game. Which is, really great for them. Once again, the Jets pull a massive upset, win 16-10, and Pittsburgh might have just doomed themselves out of the playoffs. And we're moving on to a sad game. Oakland at the Chargers. Sad. It's a funny sad, okay? It's a very funny sad. Oakland wins 24-17. Oakland snaps a 4-game losing streak, improves to 7-8, and the Chargers fall to 5-10, and they've lost 2 straight. Here's why it's funny sad. This is going to be the Raiders' last game in California. They had their last game in Oakland, but they played in LA in this one, and it felt like a home game because even though it was in the Chargers Stadium, which is a soccer stadium, and this is the last time they'll play in said soccer stadium because they're moving in with the Rams next year, the Chargers were booed coming into their home stadium like they've been every single game since they moved there the last couple of years because they've failed to get a foothold in Los Angeles because the market can't support 2 freaking teams. And they got booed coming out of the tunnel to start the game. It was so funny. It was so funny. And the Raiders get a big win, and it surprisingly keeps very slim playoff hopes alive, if you can believe it or not, which we'll get to here in a second. So Derek Carr and the rest of that Raiders offense finally show some signs of life as they finally put up some points in the second half of this game to keep the Chargers at bay. Raiders jumped out to an early 7-0 lead in the first quarter and did just enough to stay out in front the rest of the game. Thanks to a nice day by Derek Carr, who went 26 of 30, 291 yards, 1 passing touchdown, 3 sacks. He also rushed 1 time for 3 yards and a rushing touchdown. So, very nice day for Derek Carr. Hunter Renfrow, the wide receiver, 7 catches, 107 yards, and 1 touchdown. A very nice day from them, and it kept them moving and churning on offense. It didn't take much to beat this bad Chargers team, to be honest. I mean, for crying out loud, the Chargers rushed for 19 total rush yards. That feels offensive, in all honesty. At least, Melvin Gordon got, 2 touchdowns off those 19 yards, so at least there's that. Rivers finished 27 of 39, 279 yards, 1 sack. It was just an ugly day for this Chargers offense. Feels like every game's an ugly game for them. It was kind of a boring meh game for most of it. The only really notable thing is that Raiders are still alive in the playoffs, and this was the Chargers' last game in the soccer stadium, so at least there's that. At least you don't have to get booed by your home fans anymore, your quote-unquote home fans. So at least there's that. So we're going to breeze through this. Last mention on this game, Oakland is still alive. They have to win their game against Denver next week, okay? Then the Titans, Steelers, and Jacksonville Jaguars all have to lose. So, Raiders need to win, and 3 other teams need to lose. That is the only mathematical way the Raiders can make the playoffs. It would create a 4-way tie, and on some tiebreaker, strength of schedule, margin of victory kind of stuff, the Raiders would sneak in. That's the only way they'd get in. They have to win, and 3 other teams have to lose. Once again, Raiders win their final game in California, 27-17, in front of a lot of Raider fans. So at least they had that, And we're moving on to the most bonkers game of the year, Cincinnati at Miami. Miami wins 38-35 in overtime off a Jason Sanders 37-yard field goal to win it in the most bonkers game of the year. Miami improves to 4-11, snaps a 2-game losing streak. Cincinnati falls to 1-14 and have lost 3 straight. All right. Miami got after Cincinnati early and often. Jumped out to an early 14-0 lead in the first quarter, and that led to a 21-6 halftime lead. It was a blowout. It was all Miami. Everything was going their way. They controlled the vast majority of the game. In fact, with 6 minutes and 30 seconds left in this game, Miami was up 35-12, so a 23-point lead. This game was over. It was in Miami. They're up 23 points against a one-win team. You know, that game's over. Everybody felt it was over. And it was over. The only problem was nobody told the Bengals. Andy Dalton and the rest of that offense explode for 23 unanswered points in the final 6 minutes and 12 seconds. Capped off by an absolute beautiful 25-yard touchdown pass to Tyler Eifert as time expires to give the Bengals their final touchdown. Dalton then ran in the 2-point conversion to tie the game at 35 and to force it into overtime. It was the most crazy game and ending I've seen in years. Andy Dalton played absolutely magnificent in those final 6 minutes and arguably played his best game in quite a while. 33 of 56 for 396 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 sacks. Oh, that was a good game by him. Tyler Boyd, the Bengals wide receiver, 9 catches, 128 yards, 2 touchdown catches. Fitzmagic also had a nice day. 31 of 52, 419 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 2 sacks. And Devontae Parker had a nice day as well, the Dolphins wide receiver. 5 catches, 111 yards, 1 touchdown. Once it went to overtime, it devolved into kind of a punting affair. The scoring went away. Dolphins got into field goal range late, hit the game-winning field goal, and the Dolphins escaped with a hard-fought win. It was beautiful, and I highly recommend going and watching the highlights of this game because it was beautiful. It made absolutely no sense. This game was drunk for all intensive purposes, and if you told me a rematch of this was happening next week, I would watch it in a heartbeat. It was glorious, people. We were treated to an absolute beautiful garbage fire, and it was amazing. Both teams combined for 932 total yards of offense, mostly from the quarterbacks, and 73 total points. It made no sense, and every moment of it was absolutely beautiful. Dolphins got a nice win in front of their hometown crowd, got a little thriller in there, and the Bengals have now clinched the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So everyone's happy. Everyone goes home a winner, am I right? It was beautiful, it was magical, and I loved it. 38-35 in overtime, Miami wins, and we're moving on to a slightly less exciting game, Jacksonville at Atlanta. Atlanta wins 24-12. Atlanta improves to 6-9, and hey, they've won 3 straight. Look out for the Falcons. Jacksonville falls to 5-10, and they're back in the losing column. Falcons rode an early lead to victory in this one as Julio Jones has a monster game to hold off a very squeamish Jacksonville Jaguars assault. So, like I mentioned, the Falcons jumped out to an early 14-0 lead after an opening drive touchdown by the Falcons. And then on the very next drive, the Jaguars fumbled the ball deep in their own territory. Falcons recovered it and scored on the very next drive. And all of a sudden, they're up 14-0. And they just rode that lead. The Jaguars didn't do a whole lot on offense. In fact, the Falcons outgained the Jags 518 yards to 288. So close to 300 yards they outgained them by. Matt Ryan had a really good day, 32 of 45, 384 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, 1 sack. I'm sorry, not a good day. He did okay. It was an okay day at the office. But Julio Jones had a monster day, and he made history. 10 catches and 166 yards is what he finished with, as Julio Jones became the fastest player to reach 12,000 receiving yards in NFL history. He has been a beast, and he's continued to put up great numbers in a very lost season for the Falcons. So, shout out to Julio. Dude's had an insane career for the Falcons. Jaguars offense continues to look squeamish no matter who's playing at quarterback. Their lone touchdown came in the fourth quarter. Everything else was field goals. Gardner Minshew went 13 of 31, already off to a very bad start. 13 of 31, 181 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 sacks. It was a very bad day for the Jaguars offense. But this was the final home game for the Falcons. So this is the last time they'll see the team in Atlanta this year. And in all likelihood, the very last game Dan Quinn will coach for the Falcons. So to go out on a winning note, on a high note with a 3-game winning streak, has to feel really good for the Falcons. They got a real shot at winning this season on a 4-game winning streak. And I'm kind of pulling for the Falcons. I like Dan Quinn as a head coach. Once again, Atlanta wins 24-12, and we're moving on. I know we're kind of running through these games, but I want to make sure I get everything in here this show. Going to another wild overtime shootout that was just completely bonkers. Giants at Washington. Giants win this one 41-35 in overtime. Giants improved to 4-11. They've won 2 straight, people. Look out. And Washington falls to 3-12, and they've lost 3 straight. Daniel Jones hits Caden Smith on a 3-yard touchdown pass late in overtime to give the Giants a win and an absolute thriller in Washington. So on Friday's show, we asked, could the Giants pick up where they left off last week with their offense now that Daniel Jones is back in the lineup for them? The answer was absolutely yes. The Giants had 5 drives in the first half. 4 of them ended in touchdowns. That is really good. Saquon Barkley had a massive game in this one. Looked like his best he's looked all year, and may have single-handedly won me the fantasy football championship for one of my leagues. And I love you forever for that, Saquon. Barkley went 22 rushes, 189 yards, 1 rushing touchdown. He also caught 4 passes for 90 yards and a receiving touchdown. Just a monster day by Saquon Barkley. And Daniel Jones was dealing some absolute dimes in the first half. Danny Dimes was coming alive. And it allowed the Giants to take a 28-14 lead going into halftime. And you're thinking all is right in the world for the Giants. And you're hearing all this praise for the Giants and you're thinking, oh God, what was Washington doing on offense? Well, to be brutally honest, Dwayne Haskins was playing the best first half of football he's played all season. 12 of 15, 133 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 sacks. Playing the best he's looked all season, and it wasn't even close. Now, I just read you that stat line of what he did in the first half, because that's all Dwayne Haskins played. Because he suffered an injury, his ankle got rolled up really bad, and he got carted off the field, and his game was over. It's been diagnosed as a high ankle sprain, and he was done for the rest of the game. Case Keenum had to come in and replace him. But reportedly, while he was in the blue medical tent getting looked at, Daniel Snyder, the Washington football owner, came down to the medical tent and told Dwayne Haskins, you're not coming back in. I don't care what they say. Which is crazy. I have been watching football for like 12 years, and I have never, ever heard of an owner doing that. And, most people are going to get on Dan Snyder for being too involved in his team for doing that. But after what happened with Robert Griffin and what Washington did to him and had him playing while he was hurt and they knew he was hurt and it broke him, it kind of makes me happy that they were like, listen, we're not going to risk you getting hurt. Just sit down. That kind of makes me happy that they at least learned from their mistake. So, Case Keenum basically has to play the entire second half for Washington, and he actually does pretty good. In fact, Washington outscores the Giants 21-7 in the second half to tie the game with 29 seconds left after Keenum got a big rushing touchdown to force overtime. Then in overtime, both offenses struggled to move the ball or get anything going, but the Giants were able to put together somewhat of a drive and got to the Washington goal line, and Daniel Jones hits the Caden Smith for the go-ahead touchdown to win the game. As Daniel Jones has easily his best game of his career, 28 of 42, 352 yards, 5 touchdowns for Danny Dimes, 1 sack. I said the Cincinnati-Miami game was drunk. This game was just as drunk. 931 total combined yards by both teams, 76 points. It was a wild shootout. Case Keenum did great in relief, 16 of 22, 158 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 sack. And it's already been announced that Dwayne Haskins will not play in the season finale, so Case Keenum is going to be the quarterback against the Dallas Cowboys next week for Washington. And the Giants have something special. Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones, they're great pieces to build around. You just got to get them help. But I want to talk about the butterfly effect. It's a very interesting thing to look at little pieces of Well, because of this happened, right? So, Giants win this game. Washington falls to 3-12, and now Washington currently owns the second overall draft pick for this upcoming draft. If things hold like this, Washington will be picking second. That Daniel Jones touchdown pass could, in theory, lead to Washington drafting Chase Young, the stud Ohio State defensive lineman, at second overall, and leading Chase Young to chasing Daniel Jones around for the next 5 to 10 years and sacking that poor young man into the ground. It's just funny that this meaningless game in the middle of December that Daniel Jones won could lead to this ultra nightmarish Ohio State defensive lineman being unleashed in the NFC East. It's really fun to think about that kind of thing. So once again, Giants win a wild shootout, and who's the real winner here? I think it might be Washington, because they just won the Chase Young Bowl. Won, lost, whatever you want to call it. Once again, Giants win this one 41-35 in overtime in a wild shootout, and we're moving on to a depressing game. If you like wild shootouts, this game was not for you. Dallas at Philadelphia. Philadelphia wins this one 17-9. Philadelphia improves to 8-7. They've won 3 straight and are now in the driver's seat in the NFC East. Dallas falls to 7-8, and this Cowboys team is about as depressing gets. Dallas put forth an absolutely gutless effort that allows the most banged-up team, injury-riddled team in the entire NFL to go into first place in the NFC East, and it's just so ugly and bad. Eagles jumped out to an early 10-0 lead, and they never really looked back because Dallas never really put anything out to really oppose them. They kicked a bunch of field goals. Their offense really wasn't there. Dak was off. Despite what Dallas said that he would be 100%, he definitely wasn't. That shoulder was easily bothering him. Everybody was dropping passes left and right. The Cowboys had 5 total drop passes, the most they've had in any game this season. Amari, Cobb, Gallup, everybody was dropping passes. Zeke couldn't get anything going, and the terrible coaching, I've ranted about it enough, so I don't want to get into it here. It all culminated, and it was just a massive letdown for the Cowboys in a game they absolutely needed to have. If they had won this game, they would have been NFC East champions. But because they lost, they're now on the outside looking in. Dak Prescott finished the game 25 of 44, 265 yards, 2 sacks. I think Elliott had like 45 total rushing yards. It was a very bad day for the Cowboys offense. But I really want to praise Carson Wentz and the Eagles team. They had a heck of a game plan drawn up, and they deserve an insane amount of credit for what they did. Carson Wentz finished the game 31 of 40, 319 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 sack. They had nobody to throw to. I mean, for crying out loud, Greg Ward played quarterback in college, one of the better University of Houston quarterbacks for the past, 10 years? And he's out there and he's like their main pass catcher. Zach Ertz was playing with fractured ribs. That's been reported today. I mean, my goodness gracious, they had nobody. And they carved up this Cowboys defense. They bullied a bad Cowboys team. The Eagles, for the second week in a row, put up over 400 total yards of offense. They deserve so much credit. And good for Carson Wentz, because it feels like a lot of people have just been hating on that guy just to hate on him. I still think he's a good quarterback, but everybody wants to compare him to Nick Foles after what happened in their Super Bowl season. I still think he's a good quarterback. And this game should go to show that with literally the most undermanned roster possible, they walked into a game that they probably shouldn't have won and won it, and are now lined up great to win the NFC East next week. Now, here's the thing. Philadelphia's won 3 straight. They're feeling confident about themselves. They still have a lot of players on that team from that Super Bowl winning team a couple years ago. This team is confident. They're about to get a home playoff game. And you're telling me a team has to go to Philadelphia in January to win a football game? That's a very tough out. I know this NFC East has been garbage, and I know the Eagles aren't a good team, but that's a tough ask for anybody to go do. Speaking of the Cowboys real quick, and I'm going to put a bow on this one. Cowboys are very bad. They're a talented bunch, but very bad. There was an old Bill Belichick quote. I'm going to paraphrase here, so it's not the exact quote. But he said, no matter how talented your roster is or how talented your players are, they can't overcome bad coaching. And the Cowboys are a prime example of that. They can't overcome this bad coach. You've had 10 years, an entire decade. Think of all the great players that Dallas has had over that decade. Tony Romo, Des Bryant, Tyron Smith, among countless others. DeMarco Murray, another one. All of their primes completely wasted under Jason Garrett. And I tweeted this out after the game. I asked, do we really have to sit through another week of Jason Garrett being the head coach? Because it's obvious it's not working. Can we just go ahead and cut the cord? Please. So here's the setup. Eagles play Washington. No, I'm sorry. Eagles play the Giants next week. Dallas plays Washington. They kick off at the exact same time in the 4 o'clock time slot. Eagles win their game. They are NFC East champions. If the Eagles lose and the Cowboys win, Cowboys are NFC East champions. I said last week both teams lose. That means Cowboys win the division. That math was wrong, and I apologize. Both teams lose, Eagles are your champions. The Eagles are in the driver's seat, and they're probably going to win. And the Cowboys have nobody to blame but themselves. Once again, Eagles win 17-9 in a very ugly, sloppy, hard-to-watch game, and your Eagles are literally 4 quarters away from being NFC East champions. And we're moving on to Sunday Night Football. Kansas City at Chicago. Kansas City wins 26-3. Oh my goodness. Kansas City improves to 11-4 on the year, have won 5 straight. Chicago falls to 7-8, and they've lost 2 straight. Kansas City's defense showed up in a big way as it completely shut down the Bears, and Mahomes was showing off a little, wasn't he, on Sunday Night Football? He was showing off. Chiefs defense holds the Bears to 234 total yards and 3 points. That's really good. I don't care who the heck you're playing against. That's really good. Bears offense came out angry early in this one. Mitchell Trubisky, he was running the football a lot. They were gaining momentum. It felt like he was trying to prove a point because, remember, everybody's been comparing him to, he was drafted 2nd overall, and Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes were still on the board when Mitch Trubisky was drafted. He's been hearing that his entire career. And now he's playing against Mahomes for the first time, and I bet he was trying to prove a point. Well, they came out angry and they were moving the ball well. Chiefs defense shut that down real quick. They were having none of that. The Chiefs have been the best defense in the NFL for like a month? Like, really think about it. They've been playing this good for a solid month plus. It's crazy to think, but I'm going to make this statement, and I don't think it's wrong. The Chiefs might actually be a defensive first team and an offensive team second. I'm not saying their offense is bad and needs to be carried. I'm just saying that their defense is playing so good. That's their strong suit right now. I mean, Mahomes had a great game. 23 of 33 for 251 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, got sacked once. Then he rushed twice for 14 yards and a touchdown. Their offense is still great, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying their defense is playing at a very high level, and people need to be afraid of it. And, I said Mahomes was playing well. He was, and it felt like he was trying to send a message too, because this is also the first time he played Mitchell Trubisky, the guy who was drafted ahead of him. After one, he had 3 total TD touchdowns, and after one of those touchdowns, he held up his hands to show the number 10, as in 10 guys were drafted ahead of me. Like the Chicago Bears fan base needs any reminder that their team passed on Patrick Mahomes. They live with that every week. Those poor people. It was a dominating win for Kansas City. They dominated from beginning to end. The Bears couldn't get anything going, not because their offense was bad, but just because this Chiefs defense was so good. It was dominating. It was suffocating. You name it, they were that on defense. Chiefs got a really nice road win on Sunday Night Football and are really turning the corner on a potential Super Bowl run. I'm serious. I've been saying that for 2 weeks now, and I really believe it. It's probably going to be Kansas City and Baltimore either in the divisional round or the AFC Championship game, and that's going to decide the AFC. I really believe that. And Kansas City already beat them once in Arrowhead, but if they meet in the playoffs, that rematch is going to be in Baltimore, and it's going to be something to behold. Once again, Kansas City wins a dominating effort on Sunday Night Football, 26-3. And we're moving on to the last game, Monday Night Football. Vikings get a massive win on not Vikings, my mistake. Packers. I'm staring right at the word Packers on my notes, and I don't know why I said Vikings. Packers get a massive win on Monday Night Football, 23-10. Green Bay improves to 12-3 on the year and clinches the NFC North. On a weekend full of division winners, we got another one on Monday night, and Minnesota falls to 10-5. And I'm gonna be honest, this was an embarrassing loss if you're a Minnesota Vikings fan. It was a very defensive-heavy matchup in Minnesota on Monday Night Football, and the Vikings started the game in tremendous position. They got 3 first-half turnovers against the Packers, 1 interception. If I remember, the other 2 were fumbles. Against a Green Bay Packers team that had only turned the ball over, 9 times coming into this game, the second fewest in the league. They were getting turnovers. So you're thinking, oh my gosh, Vikings have a great chance. That defense has come to play. That offense just couldn't capitalize at all off those short fields and turnovers. 3 turnovers in the first half. Vikings get 10 points off of them. That's not good. That's pretty bad. Vikings offense just couldn't get anything going at all in this game, and it was a combination of multiple things. We talked about how Dalvin Cook wasn't going to play tonight, so that was big for them. Their offensive line couldn't block worth a darn, 5 sacks total on the night, but they couldn't specifically block Zadarius Smith the entire freaking game. Zadarius Smith, the Packers defensive lineman, finished with 3.5 sacks, 5 tackles for losses. That's just part of his stat line, the bullet points. They couldn't stop him to save their lives. Kirk Cousins was constantly under pressure. He seemed out of rhythm. You're missing Dalvin Cook. You're missing your backup running back too. So your running game is relying on a third-string running back and Matt Boone, Alexander Boone. I don't remember his first name. It's just Boone, who all the fantasy gurus told you to pick up in fantasy football this weekend, and he didn't do jack. So the Vikings offense struggled mightily in this game. In fact, they put up 139 total yards of offense throughout this entire game. 139. That is pathetic. I don't care who you're playing against. In the second half, though, because going into halftime, the Vikings were up 10-6 after they held on at the goal line at the end of halftime, and you just got this feeling that this Vikings defense is playing great. They're holding out. They're bending but not breaking. This offense has to do something to help them out, because if this keeps up, they're just going to let one play go. And they did have Aaron Jones go for a short touchdown run to take the lead in the third quarter. And that was one thing, when you're down 13-3 or something like that. It's another thing when you let up a 56-yard touchdown run to Aaron Jones in the fourth quarter that basically ices the game. And that was the back-breaking moment. That defense was tired. They were exhausted. They had been on the field the entire game. And Aaron Jones made them pay. And Aaron Jones had a phenomenal night, too. 23 rushes, 154 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Devontae Adams had a great night, 13 catches for 116 yards. A really great night for a Packers offense. Specifically, the key players not named Aaron Rodgers, who had an okay night. Not okay. It really wasn't that great. 26 of 40 for 216, 1 interception, 3 sacks. Aaron Rodgers doesn't need to be, Aaron Rodgers of old, where he's slinging for 350 and 3 touchdowns. If the running game plays like it did tonight, which it had about 180 rushing yards, and the defense plays this good, which was the best defensive performance they've turned in a month and a half, 2 months. If they play like this, it takes the pressure off of Rodgers where he doesn't have to do too much, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to beat this team in the playoffs in Lambeau Field because that's where they're going to be. Kirk Cousins finished 16 of 31, 122 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 5 sacks. You know, this game was a big time moment for him to kind of change a narrative about him that, you know, he can win in big time moments. But I know it's not all his fault, and I don't want to paint it as it's all Kirk's fault because it most certainly was not. His offensive line gave him no help. There were injuries abound on the Vikings team. It's just they pay him so much money. The dude's got to step up and perform. And I've been a Kirk Cousins apologist and defender for years. This was definitely not a good performance from Kirk Cousins. It was pretty bad. Like I said, it wasn't all his fault, but he certainly didn't help his critics out there. So, once again, Green Bay wins a defensive-heavy showdown on Monday Night Football, clinches the NFC North, and that's it for our recap show. I want to take a quick moment to mention that there's a slight bit of breaking news that, as we alluded to earlier in the podcast, how it sounds like the Seahawks are thinking about re-signing Marshawn Lynch. It is now apparently official, as I see it scroll across the bottom of my screen, that Marshawn Lynch has now officially signed with the Seattle Seahawks, and so has Robert Turbin, if I remember correctly. So, there you go. Seattle went from having no running backs today to having 2. So good for them. So that's it for the recap and breaking news. I want to take a quick moment to mention the playoff standings and scenarios before we sign off, and take a quick mention to say this, that I know I didn't say it at the beginning of the podcast, but we went 12-4 on our picks this week, so that's really great. Really great coming down the stretch. So just want to get that out of the way because I forgot to do it at the start. So here are your playoff standings. We're going to start in the AFC and then go to the NFC. At the first seed, you have the Ravens. At the second seed, you have the Patriots. At the third, you have Kansas City. At the fourth, you have Houston. At 5, you have Buffalo. And at 6, you have Tennessee. Those teams are in the playoffs if they started tomorrow. And in the hunt in the AFC, Pittsburgh and Oakland. We've already talked about their scenarios and what they need to happen earlier in the show. So, your wild card matchups if the playoffs started tomorrow in the AFC. You would have Tennessee going to Kansas City, a rematch of that wild shootout earlier in the season, and Buffalo going to Houston because the division winners earn a playoff spot. A home playoff game. So those would be your wild card matchups in the AFC. Then in the NFC right now, San Francisco at 1, Green Bay at 2 because they won on Monday night, New Orleans at 3, Philly at 4, we already talked about the NFC East, Seattle at 5, Minnesota at 6. All the wild card teams are locked into their spots. Nothing that happens over the next week will change that. The only team that is in the hunt in the NFC is the Cowboys, and they're only in it because the NFC East is so bad. So, your wild card matchups in the NFC, if the playoffs started tomorrow, would be Minnesota at New Orleans and Seattle at Philadelphia. So, pretty nice wild card slate. So that's where the standings stand right now. And so the next time we talk will be Friday. We'll preview the very last regular season game of the year. We will talk about every single team's playoff chances, what teams are fighting for going into that final week, who can clinch what, and how they do it. A lot of maths, a lot of its and ifs are going to be talked about on Friday. So bring a flow chart. It would really help if you brought a flow chart. Thanks for stopping by for our recap show, and I want to say I wish everybody Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and hope that everybody has a safe and happy holidays over the next few days. So thanks for stopping by, and I will talk to all of you Friday. Bye.